Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, for a team that was undefeated going into this game, I feel like the Cardinals were about as inconsistent on defense as you possibly could have been.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the thing that bothers me the most about that is just that there was not going to be a lot of mystery about what the Packers were going to try to do. They were out their top two receivers. They lost their tight end halfway through the game. They obviously were going to run the ball a lot. They're obviously going to throw short routes a lot. They weren't really going to try to ask a lot of the receivers. And the Cardinals still seemed fairly baffled by a lot of this, and just treated the Packers like they were kind of a normal game plan, normal team, that they would do normal Packer stuff. And it's just obviously that wasn't going to be the case. Absolutely wild approach on defense.
It was fun that the most successful thing that they seemed to do all game was by accident, when they realized that Randall Cobb might be targeted for a third time for a touchdown.
Yeah, right.
As somebody who picked up Randall Cobb on the waivers, I was really hoping for that third touchdown, but it was obvious that was the only person that Rodgers was going to trust down there. So,
yeah, I don't have much to add. Rodgers loves Cobb, right? Obviously, otherwise he wouldn't have played GM to get him there.
Moved him from Texas.
Yeah, there's no bigger definition of doing someone a solid than manipulating your employer to hire your friend, right? From halfway across the country. I mean, that's actually entirely across the country. That is obviously Cobb was going to be a target. That's it. There's no other way to put that.
Yeah, that was a bit ridiculous. All right, well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. We had a bit of an extended, little bit of an extended break. Hope you guys are all doing well, and we are back to talk about the Cowboys game, which is going to be happening on Sunday night. So we've got that, we've got an interview scheduled, and we've got a mailbag. But before we do anything, just want to thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to support us financially, you can do so in one of a couple different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there and get bonus episodes for $3.50 a month. You get bonus episodes. We've got about 40 up, I believe, just about, along with another one here coming up in the next day or so. So hope you guys enjoy that. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well and donate there. That's a one-time donation. Or you can be one of the many who has decided that they need to clothe themselves featuring Arif's graven image over at norsecode.threadless.com. There's two designs. One is our logo, and the second is the new Arif. So check that out. It is fantastic. People seem to be enjoying it. I keep seeing pictures of it on Twitter, and every time I do, it makes me laugh. It is.
It's absurd. It's wild and out of control, and evidently people are into that. So yeah, I guess buy it.
It's Christmas themed, it's a pun, and it's got your face on it. So why not support the cult of personality here at norsecode.threadless.com and check it out. Also, just a quick reminder that next week, 1 week from today, we will be in Arlington, Virginia, over at Ireland's Four Courts in the James Joyce Room. We'll be doing a live show over there in coordination with the Nova Vikes. Spoke to some of them today on a Facebook post. Looking forward to seeing some of you guys over there. So check us out. It's starting sometime around 7-ish. 6:30, show up or whatever. We'll probably be starting about 7:30 or so. We got a bar back there too. So check us out. Should be a lot of fun. In addition to the giveaways they'll be doing, we will also be giving away a ticket to the Ravens game. So again, if you are interested, check us out. We are really looking forward to this. This one's been circled on our calendar for a long time. So hopefully this turns out well. Hopefully we get a bunch of good Vikings fans out there for the live show as well. Also, if you happen to be over by James Madison University that weekend, it happens to be homecoming, and Arif and I are going to be heading out to homecoming at JMU, hopefully taking a lot of pictures in front of the Bulldog. and amongst other places. So check us out. That should be a lot of fun as well. All right, let's get into the show itself, and let's get into the interview that Arif cut earlier today. This is an interview with Landon McCool. He is from Locked On Cowboys and the Best Coast Boys podcast, and this is something that Arif did earlier today, and we'll be back on the other side with the mailbag.
I'm here with Landon McCool, who co-hosts the Locked On Cowboys podcast, which unfortunately means we are sharing guests with the Locked On Vikings podcast. There's no way to avoid it this week. How you doing, man?
Good. You know, it's we're getting we're both getting out of the bye this week, so we're both
that's right. Yeah,
excited to see how our teams came out injury wise, and you know, obviously see how they are going to play for the second half of the season.
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel like there's a lot fewer questions about the Cowboys than there are about the Vikings, just because you never know who the Vikings are. But there's some like pretty significant, at least in terms of impact, not I guess in terms of numeracy, injury concerns coming out of the bye for the Cowboys, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, beyond obviously the headline story with Dak and his calf, the Cowboys had several different players that were coming off of IR. That were always scheduled to come off this week of IR. So we've kind of been in sort of a, practice watch situation to see, how many of those guys are going to actually make it back on the field, and how many are still, a week or a couple weeks away.
Cool. Well, let's dive into it. Let's start, I think, with the offense. The Cowboys obviously have one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Seems to be top two in the MVP discussion. Dak and Kyler Murray, I think, are probably leading a lot of MVP discussions. From an EPA standpoint, I guess it's Matthew Stafford, but certainly up there. Is this kind of like, I feel like, the analytics guys have been kind of on Dak Prescott for a little bit, but that hasn't really been reflected in a lot of the rest of the community. Do you feel like the league as a whole has kind of taken a turn for the positive on Dak Prescott?
Yeah, it feels that way. I mean, it certainly felt like the tides, seemed to turn a little bit, early at the beginning of last year when he had a series of very, very successful outings offensively. And I think that kind of opened people's eyes to what the combination of Dak Prescott and Kellen Moore could be. Then obviously the unfortunate injury against the Giants, that kind of derailed some things. But I think, people were kind of keeping an eye out on Dak when the season started to see if he could kind of pick up where he left off. I think a lot of people were assuming that, and just because of the national media, the way they discussed it, that Dak was going to come in and be kind of slowed by injuries, due to the perceived shoulder injury and then the ankle, obviously. But those of us who had been out at camp and had been watching him all throughout training camp, were trying to temper our excitement because it had looked like he was just the same old Dak as he was before the injury.
Cool. And there is an injury concern with Dak here. Obviously, that's like, I think, the biggest headline. I think, was it Mort just tweeted at, or Mort retweeted Werder. Dak Prescott said that he believes the calf injuries were related to the fractured right leg and dislocated ankle that ended his season. Said he doesn't want his physical ability to compromise how he plays or limit Kellen Moore as a play caller. Now, reading that without any context for kind of what his trajectory is at the moment, it feels like it would be better for him not to play this week. But, reading a tweet kind of outside of that context doesn't really tell us much about kind of where he feels. What is your sense based off of kind of reading the practice reports on Dak's availability? It feels like he's probably going to play, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, before today, I would have told you if he's physically able to go, he's going. And it seems like he is physically able to go just based on what we're hearing. But I will agree that today's tone, the way Dak spoke, the way you're starting to hear McCarthy speak about it, that they must be having some sort of consideration to the idea that they may want to sit him and just kind of give it an extra week with the calf, just to make sure this isn't a lingering thing, because clearly, they have aspirations towards the end of the season and playoffs and that sort of thing. And you really just don't want this to be a lingering situation. So the Cowboys have a 3-game lead on the next team in the NFC East. They can kind of
that's not who they're competing with at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, in some ways they feel like they can afford, if they needed to maybe sit him one more game, even though it's against an NFC opponent who, may be vying for playoff position later on in the year. I think that it's one of those things where that he could play, but the question is it worth the risk to his long-term health for the rest of the season that he's because these calf injuries, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it on your teams before, depending on the position, they can tend to linger and they'll crop up and suddenly, you'll be fine for a couple weeks. And then suddenly you'll wake up and you can't walk. You're limping. So I think that the Cowboys are concerned about that, and so they're kind of monitoring that. And I really do believe that it will be like a Saturday decision because I think he pushed it really hard at practice. He said he went 100% today at practice and he felt fine. So that to me reads like he's physically able to play. But the question does stand: is it prudent for him to play in regards to the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think I saw another. I think it was a quote from Dak who said, "If there was a game this last week, he would have been able to play physically, but he wouldn't have because of that long-term risk," which I think contextualizes kind of what you were saying in terms of the type of decision that they'll have to make. So if the Vikings see Dak Prescott, they will probably get a quarterback who for that game be 85 to 100% in terms of his physical capability. But the concern is that you could aggravate or you could restrict the recovery of or whatever for that calf. So with that in mind, I mean, what's your take? Obviously, you haven't seen the soft tissue injury or anything like that. Like your take is probably meaningless, but I still want it.
Yeah, I went into the locker room and I was twisting his foot around a little bit and asking him what. No, but you're right. I mean, honestly, and here's the other thing too: is how much of this is trying to gain a competitive advantage. I mean, like here's the thing about the Dallas Cowboys. I'm sure even from the outside, everybody knows we haven't heard from Jerry Jones yet. So I'm sure that Jerry will get on the radio call probably later on today and say, Dak's definitely playing. There's no doubt.
He's going to give it away.
It just completely ruined whatever kind of, mystique McCarthy may be trying to put over this. But, look, I would say that this seems more than smoke. It seems like they are potentially actually thinking about actually sitting him for this game. I would not have said that yesterday. If we had done this interview yesterday, I wouldn't have said it. But I think the change in tone, there was a little bit of a change in tone today. So I think that they are actually considering it. I don't know if they've actually made up their mind.
All right. Well, let's talk about Dak the player then a little bit. So I'm taking a look at kind of the player profile I can kind of generate based off of various PFF metrics. It sounds like he's top 8-ish in big time throw percentage. He's got a couple more turnover worthy plays than the most elite quarterbacks typically do, but it's still fairly low relative, especially given his big time throw rate. And he's not suffering from too many drops, which is not a surprise given kind of the receiver core he's got the ability to work with. And his time to throw is not necessarily high. It's not necessarily low. It's on the lower end. So you take a look at this profile, you see somebody that it's hard to pin down kind of a play style, right? Like when you go up against Jameis Winston, you know what you're getting, right? When you go up against Teddy Bridgewater, you know what you're getting. You're getting kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. Lamar Jackson, you know what you're getting. Justin Herbert, you know what you're getting. What is Dak's play style?
Yeah, that's a good question. He is kind of a unique player to try to kind of nail down a little bit. And I think the spectrum that has always been presented that I kind of like is sort of on the Russell Wilson kind of spectrum. I think he's a guy who is kind of transitioning away from that more towards, a guy who is trying to be a pocket passer more exclusively. Obviously the injury is going to affect that as well. But where I think that Dak is really kind of grown a lot and become a top 5, top 3 quarterback in this specific area is pre-snap reads. I think that one thing he's gotten really, really good at is getting his team in position to get success from play to play by putting changing the protections, changing the play if necessary. He's got very strong command of this particular offense. And I think he understands all the different tools he has at his disposal to kind of make the adjustments to make sure that any given play is successful. He had a lot of experience at setting the line calls after Travis Frederick left. And I think, they had a really close relationship, and that kind of helped him really accelerate that part of his game. And since then, he, if you watch in any kind of pre-snap talk, he is telling everybody what to do. Essentially, he's getting people lined up, he's moving people around, and that's something that you've just seen kind of accelerate a little bit more. And the way that ultimately translates post-snap is that he knows where his answers are, and I think that sometimes he can find them late in ways that we are surprised that he can find it in a mass of bodies, and sometimes he gets out of the pocket and he's using his legs not to run, not to necessarily escape, but to change angles and to get better throwing lanes and that sort of thing. So I think the Dak's game is a lot more of a kind of a developing into. I'm not necessarily comparing him to these guys, but developing towards a sort of Peyton Manning, Tom Brady style of just being in full command of what is happening on the offense and allowing putting your teammates in best position to make score points, take the ball and get yak, all the things that will make your team more successful, and less about trying to play hero ball, which I think at times you saw with Romo, where Romo was just trying to do it all by himself. And even though he had great players around him, I think Dak is even more so than Romo, a little bit better at kind of being a point guard, a distributor, if you will.
And side note, before I ask my next actually relevant question, Romo, Hall of Famer?
Man, I mean, that's a loaded question to ask a Cowboy fan, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I gotta get that perspective, right?
Well, I've always been. I wish I could credit who came up with this. I've always been of the mind that Matt Ryan is the line of demarcation, right? Like anything Matt
That's
Ryan.
The Hall of Fame Mendoza line for you.
Yeah,
right
exactly.
Now? Yeah.
Is anything Matt Ryan and less is the Hall of Very Good. And if he wins that Super Bowl, maybe you're in the consideration. I don't know. I'm of the mind that if Eli Manning's in the Hall of Fame,
we can't. Let's shelve that, right? Because that's an insane discussion. We both know where it's coming from, but let's shelve that and say Eli Manning never existed, which obviously is a reality you want to exist in. But let's say Eli Manning never existed. And we're having this discussion about whether or not, and it's like a different random Giants quarterback that won those Super Bowls, right? So you still have to deal with that mess. But so Tom Brady only has 7 rings or whatever he has. That's it. But Romo still has none, right? And he still has kind of that history of playoff failure. You're still kind of trying to figure out how you feel about him, how you feel about Phillip Rivers, but. Romo has among retired quarterbacks, he has the highest passer rating, something like that. He's still got these impressive box score statistics. Is he a Hall of Famer?
I think he is. I think he is because again the another thing that I wish
you cannot construct an argument about Eli right now. We're not.
Yeah, I know. I'm not. I'm going to avoid the Eli argument here. The other thing that kind of line that you need to pass to get into the Hall of Fame that I like is how do you tell the history of the NFL with or without this player, right?
I hate this one. Sorry.
I know.
I hate that line.
But I kind of think that I think that Romo belongs simply because he was a huge part of that mid 2000s NFL football, had a lot of success. Again, I'm extremely biased, and if he wasn't to get in, I totally would understand it. But I think he exists hovering right around the line, and I think on any given day, depending on who you're discussing it with, he can either be above or below that line. And I honestly analytically think that I would accept either side of the argument to be straight.
All right, before we move on to people currently on the Cowboys, final Hall of Fame question about Tony Romo. I don't know, this is like a fascinating discussion to me.
Yeah.
How many quarterbacks that played substantially in that mid-2000s era would need to get into the Hall of Fame before you said, wait a minute, and demanded that Romo get in? So obviously we're getting, Peyton and Tom, right? Let's bring Eli Manning back from the dead. He's now in this discussion.
Okay.
But you've got, Ben Roethlisberger is probably the third one out of that group that's getting in, right? And now we're having a discussion that includes players like Matt Ryan, like Eli Manning, like Phillip Rivers, like Tony Romo. Am I missing someone who's probably in that discussion too?
I mean, Rodgers, but I think that's a given, right?
Oh, Rodgers, for sure. So
I can understand as a Vikings fan, not just completely dismissing Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. But okay, so...
And listen, as a Cowboys fan, I'm there with you as well.
Yeah, we're here.
We're both victims. Yeah, we can definitely commiserate on that.
So those four get in, and then Romo doesn't get in, and you're fine. So how many people beyond those four, right, when you get to Rivers and the other Manning and Matt Ryan, how many before you're like, this is a travesty?
I think the Rivers comparison is very apt, right? Like, because they had similar – I mean, honestly, I think those era Chargers teams and those era Cowboy teams were like peas and carrots, man. I mean, they were like they're twins of each other in a lot of ways. So I think if Rivers gets in, then you're having I think it's time to start banging the table for Romo, because I think that they have similar trajectories. Their numbers may not be always the same, but I think they had similar impact on their teams. That's probably the Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers, which I obviously funny enough how they're tied together, right?
Right.
I think those are the two that I would start. Really start. Okay, now it's time to start talking Romo. Yeah.
All right. So he's the fifth quarterback in from that group, you think?
Yeah,
or he
probably.
Should be.
That's fair.
Okay. Let's talk about current Cowboys.
Let's do it.
Should Tony Pollard stutter of Zeke Elliott?
Oh man, you're not asking any of the easy ones. Look, here's my take on Tony Pollard. I think Tony Pollard is his most efficient and the best player taking the amount of carries that he has currently.
That's not the question. Yeah, I mean, I feel like if Dalvin Cook only had like 10 touches a game, there'd be some really great touches. But the question is, should you swap the Zeke and Pollard roles?
No, I don't think you should. I think that if anything, now that they've sort of adjusted the carry, the touch percentage a little bit, and actually what they're really doing is they've become much more of a matchup based offense. So it's really game specific as to how much you should think about how much Pollard is going to get touches versus Zeke. So I do think that Zeke should continue to get the lion's share of snaps. And I do specify snaps as touches because I think honestly a 50-50 workload as far as touches goes makes some sense to me. But I do think that I prefer Zeke on the field more because I trust him in pass protection. I trust him in a lot of the other aspects of being on the field and helping with making Dak right, because he's for all of his faults in his last few years, and he took a couple steps back. I think he's playing as well right now as he has since he was rookie. Zeke has always been one of the smartest players on the team. He sits in the quarterback meetings with Dak. He understands protections better than almost any running back I've ever seen. And
he's like that coming out of Ohio State too. He's phenomenal.
He's always been that guy. Yeah, and he's I think one of the best balanced backs in skill sets that has been around in a long time. So I think that there is still value in having him on the field more often than not, if only for the fact that I prefer to have a running back who, if they're going to be getting at least 50% of the shares, the touches, that they're consistently gaining yards. And Pollard is kind of boom and bust, especially as you start to get him more touches. He doesn't quite see it as well as Zeke, but he has obviously that explosion that Zeke doesn't have. So it is kind of a delicate balancing act there. I just think that there is something about consistently getting positive yards the way Zeke does on every touch, even when the blocking breaks down, that is good for the Cowboys' efficiency, because they, honestly, they can't get behind. I mean, they can, but one thing that they have to avoid is getting behind the chains because of their run game. Like that's when, things really, and obviously analytics will tell you that you probably shouldn't even be running as much as the Cowboys are in first down. But I think that it's helped the Cowboys to stay in positive game scripts and not lose yardage. And I think when we seen Pollard get more snaps, I think we saw it a little bit last year as Zeke started to wear down. It seems like there's more often there's times where he's getting caught behind the line of scrimmage. He either didn't read it quick enough, he didn't put his foot down fast enough to get north and south, and he's getting gobbled up for losses in a way that Zeke doesn't really.
Zeke is currently second among non-quarterbacks in MVP odds, which, I mean, obviously means he's not going to get it. Yeah. But it's like Derrick Henry, who's like, I don't know, like seventh or whatever in MVP odds. And then, a couple more quarterbacks and then Zeke. Would you rank him second among running backs this year?
I think that MVP shouldn't be given to a running back at this point. I mean, like Derrick Henry is the only guy.
This is shorthand basically for is Zeke the second best running back right now?
There's some guys in Cleveland that may have conversations about that.
Mm-hmm. There's a guy in Indianapolis that might have a conversation about that.
I mean, honestly, depending on if he's healthy or not, there's a guy in Minnesota that I like quite a bit as well. Right. So I think that if Zeke is running right and he's healthy, he's as talented as any running back in the league. So yeah, I think there are definitely times when he's the second best back in the league, and it just so happens that the Cowboys have another guy who is maybe a top 10 running back as well in Tony Pollard.
Interesting. I mean, really, really kind words that you said towards Kene Wangu, even though he hasn't played a snap for the Vikings yet.
Well, I'm a big fan, so just got to get healthy,
Yeah, right. All right, let's move real quick to tight end before we talk about the offensive line, because I want to save receiver for last. Blake Jarwin playing better than I think a lot of people expected. Playing better than you expected? ?
Look, I'm a Dalton Schultz fan, and I think that Jarwin has been a guy that has been a receiving threat, a guy that they could use as a seam buster, a guy that they can use on the move as a kind of a move tight end who can get open against as a mismatch player, But he's just never developed as a two-way tight end. And I think for the Cowboys, they really like having the flexibility of a guy who can do both, because it just, helps to disguise what they're trying to do pre-snap. So, you're not going to be able to tell tendencies just because Jarwin's on the field and know, okay, well, they probably aren't going to run towards him, or not going to use him as a blocker here. I think he's thrived in a tight end 2 role. Because that allows them to deploy him in such a way that it plays to his strengths a little bit. And Schultz, being a guy who probably was a better technical, like if you watch his tape at Stanford, he's like a very technical blocker, but he was very undersized. So it took him a while to get up to strength and size to be a blocker, especially a tight end who can be a point of attack blocker at times, to get to that size. Jarwin, never really kind of developed the technique side of blocking. And I think he's a bigger body, but he's just not very good at it. I think both of them can catch the ball. Both of them can be receiving threats. I think that the difference is for Jarwin is that, it never really developed as a blocker. And I think that's going to limit his snaps. It's going to be interesting to see what the Cowboys do with Jarwin, because clearly Schultz has taken over as tight end 1. Jarwin's on a contract that he already signed with the Cowboys. So, and Schultz is up this year. So are the Cowboys looking to re-sign Schultz and keep Jarwin and Schultz together as a kind of a combo? would they potentially trade a guy like Jarwin, whose contract is not like prohibitive, even as a tight end too? If some team was a tight end needy and they wanted him, I think Jarwin is an interesting case because I think he has talent. I think he does something that is desired in the NFL and being a tight end receiving threat. But I think for the way the Cowboys want to play, he kind of has to be used sparingly because of his limitations as a blocker.
So if the Cowboys were only allowed to field 11 players for an entire game, you'd rather it be Schultz out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's the more rounded player, and I think up until recently, the knock was, well, Schultz isn't really the same kind of receiver as Jarwin is. But I think if last year proved anything, that's not the case. And then coming into this year, obviously he's had a fantastic year. So I think at this point, I think Schultz right now is playing. There's that top end group of 3 or 4 guys who are the elite tight ends in this league. I think Schultz is playing right underneath them, just based on this year. And we'll see if that continues, if he can continue to grow. But I think the Cowboys have been really good at developing tight ends over the years, and Schultz is just starting to kind of come into his own now.
All right, now to the offensive line. I believe Lyle Collins will take over at right tackle. Is that right?
Again, the tough questions.
Boy.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't know.
I had a tough question lined up. I didn't realize this one was also tough.
Well, it has been tough because the assumption going into the week is, yes, obviously, Lyle Collins is a fantastic right tackle. We think he's one of the best in the league, but at the same time, he hasn't played a lot of football in the last few years. Or the last 2 years, because he had the suspension. He missed all of last year because of the injury. Terrence Steele is actually who's playing right tackle for them right now. He's been more than serviceable. He was a guy who played for the Cowboys last year and was terrible. Absolutely terrible. And the Cowboys, the Cowboys fans were begging for him to get taken off the field. And the coaching staff insisted that he stay out there. I mean, the Cowboys dealt with incredible injuries on the offensive line. It's not like they had a lot of choice, but the coaching staff continued to support him. He spent the off season working with Duke Merriweather, and came back in. He won off season awards for being the guy that was in the building the most. And when Lyle Collins got suspended, most of Cowboys Nation was just like, "Oh boy, we're screwed." I mean, we Ty Nsekhe, and then we found out that it was Terrence Steele that was starting, and everyone got even more panicked. And then suddenly the Cowboys win 5 straight games with him. And Terrence Steele, may not be a great pass protector, but he's out there burying dudes in the run game. So we still expected that Lyle Collins would get his job back, get back this week. And this was the week that obviously that everyone was targeting for that. But again, kind of a lot like what, the Dak in his calf situation was, the tone was very different from the coaching staff and front office folks than we expected. And I can't really tell if it's, trying to send a message to Lyle Collins, because they probably blame a lot of what happened last year on him, because he could have gotten the hip surgery during the offseason. He came in out of shape. So because of those 2 reasons, they had to basically sit him for a year on IR after the surgery. And then I don't know if you've actually followed this whole suspension thing that happened with him, but he got it for missing tests, which should have been just a 2-game suspension. But then he exacerbated the whole situation by trying to bribe, allegedly bribe the tester and trying to miss more. So he ended up making it 5 games. So I think the front office and the coaching staff is not very thrilled with him. So I do. Part of me wonders if this is all just, kind of just teaching Lyle a lesson. But then again, I mean, as well as I do, how ball coaches are. They may not want to break up the continuity. The Cowboys have won 5 straight games with Steele. And like I said, Lyle Collins has not played a lot of football in the last 2 years. So I don't know that they're like really chomping at the bit to switch horses midstream. That was entirely too many analogies there. I apologize.
No, I'm good. I'm good. Don't worry about it.
Switching horses midstream. Chomping at the bit. Too many horse metaphors. Sorry about that.
Well, okay. Let's. Okay, so this was the actual. I shouldn't even say tough. Interesting question. Why in my timeline am I seeing a debate over whether or not Connor Williams is better than Terrence Steele, even though they play different positions?
Oh God. Well, because ultimately the other interesting aspect of all of this is that not only at the beginning of the week the PR team releases a depth chart. I don't know if they do this with the Vikings too. I assume this is an NFL wide thing, but maybe they don't. And basically,
I'm sure the PR team updates the depth chart on the website, but we never check.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, it's about that useful because it's never, the names are often misspelled. They'll call a defensive tackle a defensive end, or things like that. But on the depth chart starting the week, when we started doing a lot of these interviews with coaches and that sort of thing, La'el Collins was not only listed as the backup right tackle, but he was also listed as the backup left guard. Now, I don't know if you remember, but La'el Collins played left guard when he was a rookie.
Right?
Yeah. And he wasn't great at it. I think there was a misconception that he was really, really good. But that
was back when we were having a discussion that the Cowboys might have. They're in the running to have the best offensive line of all time. And holy crap, I can't believe they got La'el Collins for a song. A first round talent. Now you just fit him in at left guard. It's fine. He's going to end up taking over. Who was it at the time? Doug Free? I don't know. He's going to take over the right tackle position long term, and they're going to have another one of those all-decade offensive lines, which, the best laid plans.
Yeah. Oh, man. Trust me. I'm a Cowboys fan. I know all about best laid plans. Yeah. No, and you nailed it. Like, that was the plan. And ultimately, he was okay as a left guard, but not like, superstar level. Certainly not the whispers of, this was a first round pick that the Cowboys got for nothing as a left guard, right?
Mm-hmm.
He then moves because he had never played guard before, and he played he played on the left side too. But so then he moves to right tackle. It takes him a little while, but ultimately, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. He started at right tackle and he faced like a murderer's row. I think if I remember correctly, we faced like 2 or 3 of the AFC West teams to start the season. It was Von Miller, Joey Bosa. It was just that he had left end after left end that he had to face, and he played fantastic, and he shut them out completely. And I think that since then he's only gotten better. But the problem is, since then he's also delayed his hip surgery to the point where he ended up having to do it in season, so he missed the whole season last year. The drug test stuff. It's never been about talent with him, especially at tackle. It's always been about taking care of business off the field to make sure he can make it on the field.
I love the idea that after signing La'el Collins, if you told Cowboys fans, hey, this murder thing, not even remotely a thing. Don't worry about it. And he's as talented as they say. But man, are you going to be sick of this guy? If you had said those two things and then said the third thing, that would have been kind of confusing, right?
Yeah, and it's always confusing when it plays out like that too, because you hear it and then you're like, well, what does that even mean? And then you live through it, you're like, oh, that's what that means. Okay, got it. Glad I learned that life lesson. All
right, let's skip over perhaps the best guard of the past decade, Zach Martin, and talk about Tyler Biadasz. He sucks, right? Like, he's just bad.
Yeah, I mean, he's not great. And I think, ultimately they were trying to figure something out to, and we weren't exactly sure. They were trying to figure something out a little bit later in training camp where Connor Williams might be able to, kick inside there. Really, the one complaint I have about this team is probably the way they handled the center position, because it's not that I think that Biadasz was going to suck. I actually thought he would be okay, and he may still. I think he's played better lately, and a lot of it is just needing reps, just needing to play more. But he's undersized. He's getting bullied a lot. They tried to move Connor Williams into center, throughout training camp, but they did it kind of late in the game. And he really struggled to get his snaps right, because he hasn't been playing center. He's been playing guard. And the other thing that is complaint worthy, I think, is that one of the reasons they wanted Connor Williams to slide into center is because that would open up an opportunity for well-known Dallas Cowboys fullback and tight end Connor McGovern to slide into to the left guard and let Williams play center. But Connor McGovern himself played an entire year at center at Penn State, and they didn't ever try that. And now they're trying to get Connor McGovern to take snaps there. I think maybe with the idea that eventually, if he gets it right, that he may take Tyler Biadasz's spot. But I mean, it's just kind of a little bit late in the game for it. So to kind of answer your question, Biadasz has been a problem at times. He's gotten better. I think with snaps, he might continue to get better, but I don't know if he's the answer there long term. And especially in this situation where you feel like you've got two guys that are better overall football players in Connor Williams and Connor Williams and Connor McGovern. But it's kind of difficult to figure out the configuration to get them both on the field.
Is it weird that Connor McGovern is neither the best Connor offensive lineman on the roster nor the best Connor McGovern offensive lineman in the NFL?
That sounds like a coffee talk conversation.
Discuss.
Connor McGovern is neither the best Connor or the best Connor guard. Discuss. It is weird. I mean, yeah, and listen, trust me, it took, as someone who speaks about the Cowboys every day, when they drafted him, the first month was fraught with me screwing up between the two Connors. Look, I think the problem is that Connor McGovern kind of had a redshirt year his rookie year because he was dealing with an injury. He didn't get a lot of playing experience, so they haven't had a lot of opportunities to look at him. But when they've put him in there, he's a much more physical player than I think that Connor Williams is, but I don't think he's as technically sound. So they've been trying to find ways to mix him in. And to their credit, I love the way that they're mixing him in, having him play fullback, having him play tight end. I mean, look, you guys may bear witness to the first Connor McGovern carry. It's going to happen at some point. He's going to carry the ball. So I can't wait until the way that does happen.
All right, Tyron Smith, still elite or past his prime?
Oh, yeah, still elite. I mean, and honestly, that's changed this year. I mean, I don't know if you followed that at all, but, for the last few – I mean, I'm sure you've been aware of the fact for the last few years it's felt like he's falling off a cliff and just he's missing time. He's having problems. Even when he was on the field, he was struggling with his neck and his back. But what happened last year is that, because he was out for the season so early – he was finally able to have neck surgery that he's been putting off for apparently up to 6 seasons. 6 years.
Christ.
Yes, just because he never got enough. There was never a time the surgery was so serious that the recovery time was so long that he couldn't do it in the offseason because then he would have to delay the start of his offseason regimen. Blah, blah. He kept on putting it off, so he finally had it. When he got put on IR last year. And he took the cowboy collar off, that big collar that he had off, and it's just like old Tyron Smith is back. It's crazy, and
Wow.
It's especially since you hear that old adage, no one's ever used to have a bad back.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know if he's past it, but he certainly is not dealing with the kind of situations that he was dealing with before, where he was constantly getting stingers, constantly dealing with maybe sleeping on a bed wrong, having a back problem. Or just, that kind of chain of issues that all stem from that kind of neck back chain, right? It just feels like he's reached the fountain of youth. I don't know if it'll last forever, but it certainly has been absolutely fantastic to watch this season.
Final question before we go to wide receivers. Should the Cowboys just move Zach Martin to right tackle to deal with Danielle Hunter?
Let's build the whole plane out of Zach Martin's, if that was an option, I mean, please, I don't know if, they do that. I mean, I don't know if there's ever been in high school or college,
a matchup offensive lineman.
An offensive lineman who's a shadow guard, right? He just wherever he waits wherever you line up and then he motions. I mean, obviously the rules wouldn't quite allow for that because of motion and that sort of thing, but I think I certainly not against it. I personally think that La'el Collins will end up starting. They're
just playing some games to send a message.
I mean,
hey man, maybe you shouldn't have appealed this.
Yeah, that belief took some hits today, I think, and it actually took some hits yesterday. But I still am holding out that the Cowboys are not going to put the lesser of the two tackles out there against Danielle Hunter.
Okay, fair enough. All right, let's talk about these wide receivers first. If fully healthy, would you rather have Cedric Wilson or Michael Gallup?
Michael Gallup.
Yeah, I know. That was pretty easy, actually. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the thing is that you're making a fair point because Cedric Wilson is an incredibly underrated player, and the fact he can literally do anything you ask him to do, and that's incredibly valuable. And to have a guy who can be that for your team regularly, and then when you lose someone like Michael Gallup, can step up and function incredibly well as a wide receiver 3, like that's an incredibly valuable piece to have for sure. And there were people on this team, not on the team, but in Cowboys fandom throughout training camp that was trying to cut Cedric Wilson because I think he makes like a $1.5 million or something like that. Because he has a contract. I mean, it was something ridiculous. It was something so stupid. I was just like, guys, like, no, absolutely not. Don't do that. Like, it's just
save some money.
Here's my thing, and look, before we kind of wrap up on offense. I think the thing that makes Dallas so dangerous is that this is a team that is extremely well-versed in this offense. There's a lot of continuity across the board on this team, all the way down to like a Cedric Wilson and Noah Brown, who are wide receiver 4 and 5, and I think that, there's value in having these guys who can just come in as your backups and do everything that you want. And like I said, both of them are also incredible special teams players. So, I'm not trying to cut Cedric Wilson for, no offense to Malik Turner, but Malik Turner or someone that's like
full offense to Malik Turner. Come on, they're not.
Full offense to Malik Turner. I think that those guys have incredibly valuable roles in a team building sense, and they shouldn't be avoided.
If Cedric Wilson wore 13 and Michael Gallup wore 1, would your opinion change? Would Cedric Wilson just be a worse player?
The Cedric Wilson changing to number 1, that happened this year. And so like, it feels so new still that I still don't quite understand how how he's wearing it appropriately. But I think that, I do think I'm a big believer in numbers, change perception as well.
Yeah.
And I think that he looks good in the 1 for sure. It's just odd that he's wide receiver 4, right? Like that he's number 1.
He's wearing the 1. Yeah.
It's just very weird. Yeah.
All right. And we spent a lot of time on the offense. I'm sorry. Let's talk. Yeah.
I mean, we're Cowboys. I mean, we like to talk. We like to talk a lot about the offense and kind of just breeze past the defense if we can.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that defense. Let's start real quick on safety backer Keanu Neal, Jabril Cox, also safety backer. What is happening at any linebacker spot? Now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, what is happening just generally at the linebacker spot? Look, I mean, I think
the Cowboys have the lightest linebackers by listed weight in the NFL.
Yeah, and it certainly didn't get it certainly didn't get better when they released Jalen Smith, right? I mean, so yeah, right now the only guy who's got any heft in the linebacker core at all is Leighton Vander Esch. And it's still, it really still feels like they're doing their best to try to keep him off the field at this point. I think that's just the way that they want to play. I mean, obviously Dan Quinn has a history of using lighter linebackers. He likes speed at the position. And I also think that before when we had Jalen and Leighton, it provided some flexibility because they were kind of shifting the fronts that they were using in a I guess, surprising way. I mean, that was the one thing when Quinn got hired. Yeah,
we expected a classic.
Yeah,
cover 3. You've got a front 4. Yeah, and we're not getting that.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the thing, right? Is like it wasn't. I mean, look, it's okay. We want to get back to close to what Marinelli was doing because the Nolan situation was problematic. And then the two names that we heard were Quinn, and Gus Bradley. right? And when you hear those two names
Jesus
together,
Christ.
it's a very clear line of what you're going to get, right? Like, I mean, it's very, it's like, oh, okay, two Seattle, Tampa 2 guys. Okay, cool. I guess we know exactly what we're getting. And again, that is obviously so close to what the Cowboys were playing previous to Nolan as well. So there was a lot of expectation that, man, we're going to see a lot of middle of the field close coverage, and it's going to be a bunch of very predictable stuff. And then, you know, I go out to training camp every year, and I'm a couple practices deep, and I'm watching them, and I'm like, man, this doesn't look the same. This looks weird. This looks different. And the fronts are what I noticed immediately. The number of different fronts that they use, the way that they move people around up front, it was surprising. And then, you know, I don't know how much of the first few games of the Cowboys you saw, but they were playing like quarters coverage and on early downs, and they're doing stuff that, you know, that you would expect Brandon Staley maybe to do, but not necessarily Dan Quinn. And if that didn't necessarily keep up, like they didn't necessarily continue to kind of play that sort of coverage. But I think the point was that it's not a static situation. It's not, you know, hey, we're running cover 3 and you're not going to beat us at it, which has been, you know, I think the problematic aspect of cover 3 more than anything is that, you know, an unwillingness to disguise what you're doing, just, you know, basically rolling your safeties down and saying, hey, we're playing cover 3. You ready? You know, so I think that those changes in Quinn's philosophy, you know, look, we got fooled by McCarthy to a large degree of the whole PFF visit and analytics and all that. So I know what it's like to try to sell yourself as a changed coach and then to kind of have, you know, at least lackluster results and how much you may have changed. But to me, Quinn is doesn't really fall into that category. It honestly feels like a different defense than the one I would see playing in Atlanta, and certainly the one I'd see playing in Seattle when he was a coach.
Yeah, I'm taking a look at the coverage breakdowns provided to me via True Media, which is like a new tool that The Athletic has allowed me to play with. And it looks like obviously there's a lot of cover 1, but a bunch of defenses these days have a lot of cover 1. But relative to the rest of the league, it looks like, if I've got, what is it, the Cowboys are in the second column here. It looks like they've got probably the third or fourth most cover 1 in the league. They've got actually bottom half cover 3 percentage. They've got a kind of average amount of cover 2, and they play a tiny amount of cover 6. Like you said, we see a little bit of quarters, not too much. We see a little bit of 2-man, more than much of the league in 2-man, and a decent but below average amount of cover 0. So there's a huge mix here in terms of what they do. What is it about that secondary group, which obviously that includes Trayvon Diggs, but also has Anthony Brown?
Listen, we can look. We no more, and maybe that changes this week after you guys destroy us in the passing game. But I think, you know, the time for destroying Anthony Brown may be behind us, at least temporary. He's played pretty good football this year.
The week 1 and 2 stuff was like, I get it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, and maybe it's comparison, and maybe it's like, you know, what versus what we expect. But I feel like he's played better coverage than certainly what we expected. And, you know, there was a desperation to get Kelvin Joseph ready to be the opposite corner from Diggs early on. And when, you know, the injury happened and it became clear that it wasn't going to happen, you know, there's a lot of panic on Cowboys Nation that Anthony Brown was going to be the starter opposite of Diggs. And I just don't know that it's been as warranted. I think he's played pretty good football. I mean, he himself already has 2 picks and a pick 6, you know, so it's not like he has been just the other guy out there either. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that's him playing better football than he did last year. And to be fair to him, he played with broken ribs all of last season. So that's tough. But I think him playing better football, and then really the biggest difference has been the change in personnel at the safety position. The Cowboys turned over the safety position this year in a way that, I mean, first of all, they've never been able to do. They've always had problems with getting safeties. They haven't had a great safety in a really long time. And suddenly they signed 3 guys in the offseason.
Yeah, let's talk about Jaron Kearse. Let's talk about.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, and because they signed 3 guys hoping they'd hit on one, and I think in some ways they've hit on all 3. They're all 3 playing good football, good enough that they're all 3 playing regularly. But obviously, especially Kearse, who obviously you have tons of experience. And I'm interested to hear your experience on Kearse a little bit because I went back and watched tape when we signed him, and going back and watching his tape at Detroit, it looked like something had clicked with him by the end of the year. And I was interested to see exactly what kind of defensive player he would end up being, maybe as a kind of a rotational guy or, third safety, a nickel linebacker type, because they had kind of used him all over it and not necessarily to his strength until the end, typical Lions coaching, right? But I was shocked when we got what we got out of Kearse. I mean, he's been an absolute playmaker. He's a tone setter for this defense. He's a leader on this defense. It's just absolutely been an eye-opening experience.
His time in Minnesota was interesting. I'll say that. Most of the time on the field, it was actually fairly positive, had a bunch of huge errors that were fairly obvious. There were issues at Clemson where people called him soft. He did not take to that very well, but there were moments on the field in Minnesota where that kind of came out. Does not seem like that's the case with the Cowboys.
Soft is not what I would call his game with the Cowboys, at least so far.
And it was just like very weird. His tackling angles were bad. He's like a 6'5" safety. You can't really have bad tackling angles if you're a 6'5" safety. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. He was a pretty unusual guy because his splashy plays were really good. And then he would also make these catastrophic errors. So I guess, it's one of those things where it's like, hey man, if you iron those out, you'll be really good. But I could say that about like 80% of the players in the league. So I don't know how much that's worth. So he was kind of a difficult guy to figure out. And then he ended up being on the outs with Zimmer for more attitudinal reasons than on-field reasons. Decided he didn't want to play in Minnesota anymore. I don't think Minnesota was all that excited about that prospect either. So he was able to kind of seek his fortunes elsewhere. I don't think he got what he wanted out of Detroit. Seems like he's getting what he wants out of Dallas. But you mentioned that there were other people that they signed, right? And I think, tell me if I'm wrong, it feels like anything to get Donovan Wilson out of the paint. That's what it felt like. But you've added Malik Hooker, you've got DeMonte KZ, who is or isn't at fault for that kind of last minute touchdown.
It was KZ for sure.
As we all know, coverage is a binary outcome. Only one person can be at fault.
That's right. There's always someone to blame, and you can either be right or wrong about who you blame for sure.
Right. So, what is that? What is the rest of that safety? So you mentioned that the other two have all kind of looked like they've hit. Is Donovan Wilson out of the paint? Is that a good thing?
The thing with Donovan Wilson is that he was the guy that hit last year. He had an incredible year last year and was creating a bunch of turnovers and was a player that the Cowboys, at least fandom, was extremely excited about. And then when training camp rolled around, we do a lot of tea leaf reading in this job, and you just weren't hearing anything about Donovan Wilson. Not from the coaches, not from the people that whisper inside the buildings. Come to find out that, he had trained away from the facility and he may have fallen out of favor a little bit with the coaching staff. And that kind of played out a little bit in training camp because, again, like after the year he had and after the last decade's worth of history for the Cowboys and safeties, you fully expected Donovan Wilson to at least be the starter, at safety because the Cowboys didn't have a lot of great options. Enter KZ, enter Kearse, enter Hooker. Suddenly Wilson, who started training camp kind of on, I think started on PUP because of a groin that he later re-aggravated. It allowed a lot of opportunity for other folks to rotate in. Now, and then he got hurt again, and he's just now making his way back. In fact, the New England game was his first game back, and he should be playing more in this game. But I say that, but I don't really know what his role is now because I think, ultimately a lot of us loved him as a third safety because I think that's the amount of snaps that you're going to get the best of Donovan Wilson without really the way you described Curse. His time in Minnesota was kind of what we got out of Donovan Wilson, just a very boom and bust player. Like he's either making the play or he's the guy who screwed up the assignment and the play was made on him. So I think it's going to be interesting to see exactly how he gets deployed here moving forward. I do imagine that they'll try to play him more at the free safety because just it feels like when he's down in the box, he can just get washed out too much unless he's actually down there with a specific job to do, i.e. blitzing or covering a guy out of the slot. If he's
isn't that just Xavier Woods?
Yeah. We can have a conversation.
He's good now. To turn this around. He's good now. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've said that before. So, oh my God, how many times have I said Xavier Woods is good now? Yeah, I mean, and I think ultimately at the end of the day, he has really good instincts for the ball. I'll talk about Wilson again. He has really good instincts for the ball, but I think sometimes he gets fooled by his eyes. And I think that's why he struggles to be down in the box because, it just happens so fast. Mm-hmm. I think he sees it a lot better when he's in the back.
All right. Trayvon Diggs, a lot of yards given up, a lot of picks added in. PFF, the nature of their grading prevents them from being able to grade him too highly because you can only max out on a particular grade at plus 2.0. So his PFF grade is not that great.
Yeah.
But I believe he leads the league in EPA in coverage as the nearest defender, which of
by
course
a lot too, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's shocking how the distance between him and number two.
Nearest defender tracking also assigns DeMonte Casey that touchdown. That's all I'm going to add on there. So the chips have their quirks, right? But it seems like it's been worth it. But turnovers are like he's not going to keep up this insane streak that he has. Turnovers are fairly volatile. Yards given up are not fairly volatile. Will it continue to be worth it?
That's a very good question. And I think, if you're a realistic Cowboys fan, it's a question you need to ask yourself about this defense.
Zero Cowboys fans will be asking themselves.
Yeah, I know. And that's why I said I preface it with realistic Cowboys fans, which is a dying, if not dead breed. Yeah, I mean, I think that turnovers will always be a big part of Diggs' game because I think he does have a preternatural ability to not only get towards the ball, but to finish the play. Because I think that's the difference, right? Is that, there's a lot of guys who are as good, better than him at, studying tape, understanding passing concepts, understanding formations, and then, seeing the formation, realizing who the team is, knowing their tendencies, and being able to break because, okay, they only run this bunch formation with the wide receiver alone on the weak side when they're running a slant to him. So I know that this guy's running a slant. And there's lots of guys who have that kind of knowledge, who study tape, who understand it, who could see it in that kind of real-time speed and react to it. I think the difference between him and a lot of other people is that he has that, and then he also has an incredible ability to catch the football, a wide receiver ability to catch the football. And I think, people have been talking all week, like, what's your favorite interception of his? I think the last one he did was unbelievable against New England. And it wasn't like it was, he broke on the ball and picked it off. And that's what, because those are the interceptions that always make people's eyes saucer, right? Is that, oh, what a great break on the ball. He's got it. What a great read. This was a situation where it was just deflected off the receiver, but he was able to catch the ball off a deflection while midair stepping over another player and bring the ball in quick enough to secure it to run it back for a touchdown. And I think that having that kind of hand-eye coordination and ability to put yourself near the ball, I think he will be a guy that gets a lot of turnovers in his career. However, I agree. There is a 1-for-1 ratio of games to interceptions is probably, and actually he's higher than that for this year.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a realistic pace to keep up. So I do think that he needs to get better as a sticky cover guy. But I also wonder how much of the yardage that he's given up is due to the fact that there's times when he's baiting guys and then he just didn't make the play on it, So I think he will.
I know Richard Sherman, back when he was an elite corner, would talk about how good corners actually do get the ball thrown at them because they're baiting guys. And he would continue to bait quarterbacks to throw to him, and he would get picks, but he didn't give up nearly as many yards.
Sure. And Diggs talks about that too. And I think that, it's one of those situations where it hasn't come back to bite the Cowboys yet. But it certainly could. I mean, because he's considered to be the best corner on this team. I mean, he is the best corner on this team. There's no doubt about that.
It was the debate, yeah.
But
I like not Jordan Lewis, but let's be real.
Oh man, well, I mean, you liking Jordan Lewis is better than most of the Cowboys fans, that's for sure. I think for Diggs, he's clearly the best corner on the team. But the question is what do you want your best corner to be? Because he is kind of the opposite of what we had with Byron Jones, right? With Byron Jones, no one threw at him. But he also never got any interceptions ever while he was there, basically. I mean, I think he got one while he was here. So the Cowboys didn't necessarily want to pay for that. I think for the Cowboys and their team.
What if they could have just had both? I mean, I understand that the cap exists, but it would have been nice to have, instead of Anthony Brown, Byron Jones and Trayvon Diggs, and then Diggs gets all the targets. That feels good.
Look, if hindsight is 2020, I'm sure they may have gone back to that.
It's not that they didn't know Byron Jones was good, though. Hindsight's 2020.
You're certainly right there. But at the same time, I think they honestly are. I think that there's something to the way that the Cowboys want to win football games, that they would rather have volatility on defense that is creating turnover than just very vanilla, unable to make a play when they need to, because ultimately it was the same. Even with Byron Jones on the team playing as well as he was, it wasn't like it prevented anybody from moving the football on the Cowboys. You know what I'm saying? At least now they're getting turnovers. They're getting the ball back, and they have an offense that they believe and we believe is a juggernaut. So if you can get the ball back a couple different times, and although I don't necessarily believe that Diggs will continue the pace of interceptions, I do kind of believe that the Cowboys can at least keep up a level of turnovers, week to week. Hopefully one or two a week. Maybe. I mean, I don't know if that's completely unrealistic, but I think that
the Cowboys lead the league in turnovers per drive on defense. That's not going to maintain itself.
No, probably not. But I think keeping a high level of turnover, in considering where the Cowboys have been in the past, let's say 4 or 5 years, keeping a higher level of turnovers will do wonders for giving this offense, which is how they want to win, more opportunities and more chances to win these games.
Sure.
They just clearly are not interested in being a defense that is a shutdown defense. They want a defense that's getting the ball back to their offense.
All right, so real quick question before I've got this question. I've got a question about linebackers, and then we'll go back to the defensive line. So we saw Deion Sanders take snaps at receiver. We saw Patrick Peterson take snaps at receiver. Now, the difference, of course, is that the Cowboys have a lot of good receivers, but will we see Trayvon Diggs, who did play receiver at Alabama, take snaps at receiver?
I don't know.
It doesn't have to be this year. I just mean for the Cowboys.
I think maybe, honestly. I mean, look, as soon as Connor McGovern catches a pass, Trayvon Diggs is walking right over to Kellen Moore and be like, man, come on. So if they're giving Connor McGovern the ball, I have a feeling Diggs is going to throw his hands up pretty.
Well, Diggses are known to demand the ball.
That's true.
Real quick on linebackers, would you rather have Leighton Vander Esch's rookie year or the current trajectory of Michael Parsons' rookie year?
the current trajectory of Micah Parsons, I think. Because I think what you could do with Micah Parsons is unique.
Mhm.
And I think that I can go find very good linebackers to fill in on the back end there.
And ask them to do linebacker things.
And ask them to do linebacker things, yeah. And I Parsons is a kid that, his skill set is so rare. I don't, look, I don't know if you know John Owning or what he does with, he works with PFF, but he
was actually my first, you were my second choice for this podcast. He was my first
wow.
choice. Yeah.
Wow. Well, there we go.
Yeah.
And I take no
cards
offense
on the table.
No offense to that because, former podcast partner. I mean, we're really good friends. And I think that, Parsons is a guy that, a lot of people were skeptical as a pass rusher, and John was one of them. And I think, once he got in there and you actually saw what he could do.
For context, John Owning's specialty is talking about pass rushers. So
yes, absolutely.
He's very interesting. Yeah.
Very, very, very well, very knowledgeable on everything from, stringing moves together, all the different types of moves.
Yeah.
He
the
likes
amount
to
of things
rushers.
I've plagiarized from him when talking about pass rushers. Wow.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Constantly got to steal from John because you got to steal from the best, right?
Yeah.
Parsons made a believer out of him, and I think because you just were like, look, this guy's he's undersized, like he's it takes a crazy special athlete to do what you guys think that Parsons can do, and then we watched a couple snaps, you're like, oh yeah, he is that crazy special athlete. Oh, never mind. Okay, cool, we're good with that. Let him go. That's basically where we're at. Is that he suddenly is able, despite not having done it in college, to go out and beat NFL left tackles with quality sacks, pass rush moves, not just like speed around the edge.
Right.
And that's incredible, an incredible tool to have. And especially in a defense, like we mentioned, that is truly trying to be kind of matchup based and truly trying to find ways to attack an offense game plan by game plan.
All right, let's talk real quick about the defensive line. So you've got the better Odighizuwa. I really
almost by default, right? Because it felt like Owa just he couldn't stay on the field. I loved him coming out.
I really liked him coming out. Yeah,
and but I knew that he was kind of stiff hipped, and then the injury problems happened and. Yeah,
and you didn't know if he could play DT or edge or whatever.
Yeah, there was some position flex stuff with him. But I'll tell you this: I personally, and John will tell you this. I personally have been a huge Osa Odighizuwa fan for a while. I just think that his combination of background. I love wrestlers who are in the trenches. It's just such a clean translation. It's so.
That's a very Vikings take, by the way. They draft an inordinate amount of wrestlers. Yeah.
Well, wasn't oh man, now I'm really gonna feel bad. Who's that really all-time great defensive tackle? John Randall. Wasn't John Randall a wrestler in college?
Probably.
Yeah, I think there's just something
that really fits, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just like those guys who are kind of undersized a little bit, but incredibly strong. Understand leverage, right? Like that's the thing about wrestling. When you understand how to contort your body to get as low as possible while maintaining the most amount of power, that's incredibly difficult to deal with. And when you're explosive and you're playing that low, it can allow for even some mistakes with your hand usage because you're just so disruptive and you're just getting in there and whether it's run blocking or pass blocking, you're muddying the waters so bad that I think it's incredibly disruptive and it's incredibly useful for a defensive line that, I mean, you want to talk another position, right? Defensive tackle and safety were the two positions that all Cowboys fans were just like, what are we going to do? And, we drafted Odighizuwa, we brought in some other guys, but no one expected, maybe except for me, Odighizuwa to actually do anything this year. And then even worse, we lost our guy that was supposed to be our starting under tackle in Neville Gallimore, who should be coming back in the next few weeks. But obviously Odighizuwa came in and played about as well as you can expect for a rookie defensive tackle third-round pick. And now they're kind of using him in all sorts of ways. I mean, I've seen him in formations where They line up him as the defensive end. And then inside, they've got Randy Gregory, Micah Parsons, and Terrell Basham all like as interior pass rushers. And then they just run crazy stunts off of that and just looping guys around and getting them free. And that's really been the way that the Cowboys have been kind of creating pressure. Is they certainly don't have what the Vikings have as far as talent on the defensive line necessarily. I mean, there are some guys, like Gregory is certainly a guy, and Parsons is certainly a guy. But I think that the reason that they've had any success outside of Gregory's high quality sacks is they've been really good about sending Parsons up the middle, as a guy that's basically essentially opening things up for Odigizua, who's looping around as a spike, is what I was trying to say, and then opening things up for the defensive tackles kind of loop around and get free. And really, that's been the best way that the Cowboys have found to consistently get pressure on third downs when they put their offense in those kind of third and long situations.
So do you trust the Cowboys to consistently get pressure on third down then?
No, I mean, I'm still, I'm still very much, scarred from the last few years. Look, I'm starting to trust it more. I think if you're getting into a third and long situation, I do believe the Cowboys can get you off the field this year in a way that they haven't been able to in the past. It's not like it was in the Buccaneers game where literally every single time a third down didn't get converted, Cowboys Nation was like, what just happened? What happens when they don't get the third down? What happens on fourth down? We've never been here before. It's like they just didn't understand what a punt to us was after the 2020 season. And we now at least have a level of expectation that the Cowboys, if they get into those third and longs, they can get off the field. But I don't know that I'm ever going to, or at least not currently, truly in my heart believe it. Oh, it's third and long, the Cowboys getting off the field. They just have not had that kind of defense in a long time.
All right. General question. Is the best athlete on the team Siwo Olanula? Oh,
man. Seo is an incredible athlete. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if this is something that you studied my timeline, which I'm assuming you have not, and you're not everyone's watching me like my paranoid self thinks. But I'm a huge Seo fan, and I'm also the fullback guy in Cowboys Twitter. Like anytime a fullback, because I played fullback in high school, so anytime a fullback does anything, everyone's like, oh, McCool BCB is really enjoying himself right now. So, when I watched in training camp, Seo Olanolua running a wheel route free up the sideline and getting a 50-yard touchdown against the Rams' #1 defense, I'm losing my mind, and when he got hurt, it was very, very unfortunate. And I was very upset because I really thought he was going to open it up. But to answer that was a very long-winded way of saying, I think he certainly is in the conversation. I think Parsons is certainly in that conversation as well. But yeah, he's you don't see many people built like him that move like him. That's for sure.
All right. So the answer to this next question cannot be DeMarcus Lawrence or Michael Gallup. Okay. If you could take someone out of injury or out of the reserve, right, and make them potentially active, who would it be?
Well, currently Neville Gallimore is in the injured reserve,
right?
So it would be him, yeah. Okay. Because honestly, we watched a lot of what he was doing in training camp, and he was the guy we were excited about at defensive tackle for this season. Odigizua was obviously showing things well beyond what you thought a rookie could do, but Gallimore was the guy that you thought, okay, this guy can actually be something as a defensive tackle this year. And unfortunately hurt his shoulder and that kind of has derailed things a little bit, but he was the guy I would definitely choose, just because I feel like if the Cowboys were able to kind of start to consistently get pass rush from the middle of their defense, I feel like this defense would go up a notch, because that's really something that they're missing here. They kind of have to manufacture that. Yeah. They kind of have to manufacture it a lot, and they do that with Parsons sometimes. They do that with like I said, kind of a unique alignments. and then, stunts, that sort of thing. But if they were able to just kind of line up and have two guys in the middle who could rush the passer, that would be something that would take this defense from, hovering below average to maybe even above average.
Next question. When will the Cowboys allow the next Tony Romo, which of course is Ben DiNucci, a real shot at proving himself?
I think Ben DiNucci's been given his shot. I
don't know. You got to let him develop. He was a rookie. Come on.
Look, I mean, let's be honest. Mike McCarthy's not going to let him fail. He's like McCarthy. I don't know if you know the history here, but he's like McCarthy's brother-in-law's, like, he coached him in basketball in Pittsburgh or something. Like there's like a nepotism thing here somewhere.
Dope.
So if you're a DiNucci fan,
which I am, I bought. There's a shirt that is him in a Dallas Cowboys uniform that just says GOAT. I bought that shirt. I'm wearing it to a James Madison homecoming game in the coming weeks.
That's exciting.
We're all in on Ben DiNucci on this podcast.
You're not a real DiNucci fan unless you hold your pointer finger and your thumb together on both hands while you're saying his name, DiNucci. My wife always. My wife's Italian, and every time she hears that name, she always comes in with a very over the top,
perfect
Italian. But yeah, I think he is a guy that is going to get lots of opportunity because of that. And say what you will about
That's
it.
That's good. So will he overtake Dak in 2023 then? You think?
I mean, that's, you really think it's going to take that long? I don't know.
The contract. That's what worries me is the contract.
Look, he's got a hurt calf right now, so maybe they just get a couple DiNucci snaps in there with one. You're like, you know what, this guy.
Honestly, he should be on activation watch, right? Because they can activate people on game day. You just don't want to throw Cooper Rush out there.
He's so bad. I can't do it anymore. He's so bad. Honestly, if we could just get him to consist, there's always talk about, this guy can throw from different platforms, and he's got all these different arm angles. Ben
DiNucci has one arm angle, and it is insane.
DiNucci, throw it over the top. Throw it over the top of your shoulder so you don't get the ball knocked down at the line of scrimmage. It's infuriating, honestly, to watch.
He's 6'3" and he throws like he's 5'8". I love it. It's amazing.
It's Vince Young. Like Vince Young had the same thing, right? Like where it was like, you got this 6'4" quarterback who's, but it's not useful to be 6'4" if you throw it at the same height as someone who's 5'11". It's just that doesn't, you don't need to include his height anymore at this point. Yeah, it's. I think he has some athleticism to him. I think he does have some arm strength to him. I haven't seen very much development, and that's what you clearly need to see.
So they should treat him like Taysom Hill for a while. Then is what you're saying?
Oh, definitely. Design some packages, for him.
For sure.
Yeah, because I'm sure, the Cowboys fandom would definitely.
You got to
definitely
put the ball,
accept that just as well as the Saints fans have, right?
Right. Yeah, you got to take the ball out of the hands of Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott and put it in Ben DiNucci's hands. That's for sure what you need to be doing.
Anytime you can give DiNucci the ball in space, you absolutely have to do it. You've got to do it, guys.
All right. So he is on activation watch. We'll keep you updated here on the Norse Code podcast.
Long-term, deep dynasty sleeper, guys.
Yeah, for sure. I do have him. I think on one of my dynasty rosters. It's a great bit.
You really. I mean, did you coach his brother-in-law in basketball? What's your excuse?
I'm a Duke for life. That's what my excuse is. All right. All right. Game predictions. He's not the only James Madison guy on the roster, right? There was another one. No, Rondell Carter's no longer on the roster.
Yeah, Rondell Carter, who I really liked a lot, decided he didn't want to be on the Cowboys practice squad. And I get it, because honestly, think, he actually could. I don't know where he is right now, but he could be on an active roster, I think.
I think he's on a different practice squad right now.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I really like him.
We might see him tonight. He probably won't.
You may actually, especially if JJ Watt's hurt. Maybe they'll call him up.
Hey, yeah, there you go. Finally, we get some.
Gonna
get
get Wally pipped by another great Madison guy.
You heard it here first, folks. This is getting published after that game, so we'll see what happens.
Oh, good.
All right, real quick, game prediction. I think the Cowboys, they opened at 2.5-point favorites. They are now 1-point favorites. I think that's entirely because of the Dak Prescott stuff. Game prediction, go.
I'm actually worried about this game for the Cowboys. I mean, I think, the Vikings present a balanced offense. And I think, the Cowboys, they can win a whole bunch of ways. Their offense can score almost any way you can conceive. They can take advantage of whatever defense they face. I really do believe that. I think the problem they're going to run into is when they face a team that may stymie them early on, and that allows the opposing team's offense to remain balanced, and that's where the Cowboys' defense will rear its ugly head, right? Because if the Cowboys can't force the other team to get into a passing situation early and play with the lead, then they let teams linger, and they'll let a team linger all the way into the fourth quarter. And when it gets to the fourth quarter, it could be anyone's game. The Cowboys are lucky because Dak Prescott is one of the best fourth quarter and overtime quarterbacks apparently of all time. After looking at some of the numbers, it's
well, but the numbers also tell us that Tony Romo was fantastic in the fourth quarter too.
Well, he was fantastic in the fourth quarter, just maybe not in the
just not when it mattered. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah.
Well, I think if Dallas doesn't take care of business early and they let the Vikings kind of hang around, then I think it could be a coin flip at the end of the game. But I do
great
expect
another coin flip game for the Vikings. They've only had
I was going to say, well, I mean, it's all you guys know, right? I mean, all you guys know is playing coin flip games, and all we know is playing down to our competition. So I don't see how this isn't going to be a coin flip game, honestly. So I think the Cowboys are going to try to make this game one dimensional the best they can, whether that's through scoring points or just focusing on trying to stop the run and make Kirk Cousins beat them. And if it becomes a game where it's hurt Dak Prescott versus Kirk Cousins, no offense, I'm probably still picking the Cowboys, I think.
No, I get it. If it's down to Greg Zuerlein making the game-winning kick, are you confident?
I'm probably not conscious. I've probably blacked out as he lined up to try to make the kick. No, I'm not confident. I mean, I think I'm certainly not as confident as Bones Fossil is in Zuerlein. So
an all-time great special teams coach. You put some respect on that name.
I like Bones Fossil way more than most folks do. I just don't love his confidence in Greg Zuerlein.
All right, so we got two shaky Gregs kicking for the teams on Sunday night. This is going to be fantastic. Well, thanks for coming on. So if people want to find your takes, they can follow you on Twitter. Was it @McCoolBCB?
That's it.
What kind of name is McCool? Like is that a natural? Is that an Ellis Island name? Is that what's going on here?
It's an Ellis Island name. Yeah, I mean, I think the original name was McGool, and they butchered it in the most awesome way.
Yeah, that's incredible. Wow, that was a long play by like your great grandfather for that to come into the slang.
He played it right, and we're all now all his great grandchildren every once in a while have to occasionally hear from strangers. McCool, what a cool name. And I'm like, oh, thanks.
all right. So @McCoolBCB, spelled how it sounds. And they can hear your takes. Locked On Cowboys, is that right? Anything else to plug?
That's right. Yeah, Locked On Cowboys podcast with me and Marcus Mosier. If you want to, you can ignore Marcus and just listen to me.
No, for sure.
And that's totally cool too.
All right. Well, thanks so much, man.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's go to the mailbag. And the first question is from Kyle Slaby, who asks, was the Weatherly trade made more as a result of Everson's play or Weatherly's?
A little bit of both. Obviously, they wouldn't have done it if Everson Griffin wasn't playing at a really high level. But I think that part of it also was the fact that Weatherly was responsible for the blocked punt. He should have been the one blocking the crossing blitzer on that punt protection. It was sort of referenced in a presser today with the special teams coordinator. We asked, hey, what can you do to prevent, stuff like that in the future? And, he basically said, well, it wasn't as if, they found a hole in our protection or anything like that. The protection was fine. It was down to the execution of a single individual. And that person was Stephen Weather, who's no longer with the team. So I think that plays a role for sure. But also, the fact that he wasn't playing well on defense when he was on defense, I think that's all of those are big contributors. But I think that if he hadn't done that on the blocked punt, he'd still be on the team. If he was playing better on defense, he'd still be on the team. If Everson Griffin was playing worse, Weatherly would still be on the team. So I think it's a combination of all three factors.
Also from Kyle Slaby, is the head coach of the 2022 Minnesota Vikings going to be coaching Sunday night for either team?
I think there is a non-zero chance that Kellen Moore will be in the coaching cycle, the head coaching cycle next year. I think there's a non-zero chance that the Vikings will be also looking for a new head coach within the next year. I think that it would not surprise me if ownership decided to go in the opposite direction and hire an offensive head coach as opposed to a defensive head coach in the next coaching cycle, should they be looking for one. So all of these do kind of fit together. Kellen Moore, from my understanding, is also analytically minded, and that's something that the ownership seems to value. He's running a really good offense. So it's entirely possible, for sure.
So I was going to say, if he was trying to imply that Mike McCarthy was going to end up coaching the Vikings,
no, absolutely not.
We might have to exercise that block button here.
That would be funny, but no, absolutely
not. For content purposes, maybe.
Yeah.
For watchability, no. Jeremy McGee asks, with a non-turnstile option at left tackle, do we expect a change in play calling? Will younger Kubiak potentially call longer developing plays and take more deep shots if Darrisaw continues to play well?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's entirely within the realm of possibility that when they become more comfortable with the way the offensive line is protecting, and a big part of that is Darrisaw's play, that they will call longer developing plays. I think this was something that was brought up in one of my pieces a little bit ago, that the way that Darrisaw is going to be influencing play call, or I may have even said this on the last podcast, the way that Darrisaw is going to be influencing play calling is not, or the offense is not necessarily a reduced pressure rate, although he might do that, but rather an increased affordance for what the Vikings can do. And so he might be asked to do more as the season goes on, and therefore give up the same or an even worse pressure rate. But because the likelihood of getting pressure late in the play is now lower, the Vikings are much more likely to demand more of him, call deeper dropbacks, call slower plays, and be able to develop a more explosive offense. So I think that's going to be the ultimate effect of having, two tackles that you trust. So yeah, I think that that's certainly on the table for sure.
Next question is going to be from Jack Rackham, who asks, when facing a team like Dallas or the Vikings that has a dynamic ability through the air and on the ground, do teams try to stop both attacks, or do they generally pick one or the other to shut down and hope for the best against whatever they don't choose?
From a very simpleton perspective, yeah, they try to stop both attacks. But from the spirit of your question perspective, my understanding is that teams actually do try to pick one in hopes that it'll kind of defang the other. And that they'll kind of just, ride up their hopes for the other one. So if the Vikings kind of determine hey, they've got a really good passing game, but a lot of that passing game is dependent on, this element of play action or protection capability that Ezekiel Elliott provides, or, a lot of it's occurring on third down, or on ambiguous downs where they could either run or pass. We're going to try to stop the run to put them in pass only situations. It's going to be better for us. Right. Or we're going to limit their playbook in some way. Belichick very often does this, invites the running game in order to stop the passing game, and we'll just take less efficient runs. So, teams will very often pick their poison, based on kind of their understanding of what kind of wins in football, what'll work based off of the qualities of both teams in particular, so on and so forth. I don't think that they try to kind of evenly devote resources across both. I think that they try to pick a strength and get rid of that and make an offense one-dimensional.
Next question is from John Belk, who asks, if the Dolphins actually trade for Watson, pause for vomiting, should the Vikings try to trade for Tua as a QB of the future flyer? If so, how much would you be willing to give up?
My guess is not enough that the Dolphins would be willing to trade Tua in that scenario, right? The 49ers just drafted a quarterback, right? Like a top 5 quarterback. He's going to be the quarterback of the future. It doesn't matter that he's actually a safety. You know, they've invested a lot of talent at the position, and they still don't want to trade Jimmy Garoppolo away. Seth Wickersham recently reported in his book that there were some informal conversations between the Patriots and the 49ers, where the Patriots were trying to kind of feel out what the price might be for Garoppolo. You know, it's not necessarily that they were actively involved in trade talks or anything like that, but they were like, you know, what if it was like a second round pick, and the 49ers were very firm in that it would be a first round pick. In some of the same way, I would imagine that the Dolphins would try to hold out and make that a first round pick cost. And I would not trade a first round pick for Tua Tagovailoa in a world where the team that drafted him gave up on him. I would certainly explore that opportunity, right? I would love to see kind of what a competition between Kellen Mond next year and Tua Tagovailoa next year looks like. I don't think either of them are the QB of the future, but I think that having those flyers, having those dart throws in your quiver or whatever, terrible mixing of analogies, Jesus. I think that's a good thing to do. So I would look into it. The most I'd give up, I think that I would give up a second round pick for sure. I think that Tua is not yet a franchise quarterback, but I think he's probably one of the top 32 quarterbacks in the world right now. So I think that's worth at least a second round pick. So I would probably throw that in. I would not trade a first though. I think that that's a little bit too much. So that's kind of where I would be, and I just don't think that the Dolphins would be in the same spot.
Jacob Wander asks, for the mailbag, on a scale of 1 to butt fumble, how funny is it that Marcus Williams didn't learn his lesson from the Minneapolis Miracle and did the exact same thing on DK Metcalf's touchdown on Monday?
It's definitely not butt fumble. It's definitely not Eli Manning finds himself surprised by a Jared Allen sack that he can't see. It's not up there, but it is funny. I gotta say, probably just because the moment wasn't that big, relatively, like it didn't occur in a playoff game, it's probably not as funny as the Malcolm Butler pick of the Seahawks, or the Brandon Bostic screw up against the Seahawks. And they've got a lot of funny playoff moments, huh?
Was it funnier than Tony Romo's inability to hold on to the ball?
Yeah, I think it's in the same category. I'd still take Tony Romo's, like, because he was holding on a field goal snap, right, or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit funnier, but I think it's in the same tier. So to me, that's probably like a 6 or a 7, maybe. The problem is that this didn't occur in a playoff game, right? So it just that reduces the memeability of it. It is a repeat offense, so that helps. But I think that the fact that I think Romo's occurred in the first round of the playoffs.
It did.
Yeah. So there's that. The snap flying over Peyton's head in the Super Bowl in a regular season game, that's like not that funny. It's like kind of funny. In the Super Bowl, that's hilarious. So it's just like, it's like one of those things. But yeah, I think it's like maybe a 6, possibly a 5, just because it's a regular season game. But the repeatability is funny.
Arif's Neglected Resistance Bands asks, exactly how much merch would I have to buy on norsecode.threadless.com for Arif to acknowledge me? Rashastar Pupil is asking, what gets brought up more this time of year, Herschel Walker trade or the 91 Blizzard?
Incredible question. I think both references are dying in Minnesota pop culture. I think there's just fewer references to the 91 Blizzard, which I wasn't even here for. And I feel like Minnesota's played Dallas often enough that the Herschel Walker trade just is kind of old hat, I guess. But both get brought up a lot. In my experience, the 91 Blizzard gets brought up more because people bring up the 91 Blizzard are Vikings fans, but also people bring it up are not necessarily Vikings fans, right? Vikings fans are the only ones that bring up the Herschel Walker trade, or at least football fans, right? But both football fans and non-football fans will bring up the 91 Blizzard. So I think that that's kind of the tiebreaker for me. Man, I heard about it so much growing up as a kid. But I think it's that. I think it's that, not the Herschel Walker trade. But I think it's a good question. I think it's close. And it's going to get brought up more as Herschel Walker makes a run at governorship or something like that, like he's running for office. So that could flip back in Herschel Walker's favor very soon.
He is doing his best to get back out into the world. I'm just trying to figure out what he was running for here. I believe it's Senate in Georgia.
Senate. Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah,
well, that's even funnier, honestly, just because of how charged the Senate races in Georgia specifically have been. But yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. That's good. That's hilarious. If you look up his Wikipedia page, it's Herschel Walker's an American retired football player, political candidate, bobsledder, sprinter, and mixed martial artist. And all of those things he has spent enough time at where it's justifiable to list it on the things that he's done. That's the best part.
I remember watching his MMA fight. I believe it was for Strikeforce, was the name of the company. It was the number 2 company at the time behind UFC. And Herschel Walker came in for his first fight and just wrestled and beat him. He's like 50. It's like that was kind of unheard of. And then he went off and did it again. And I was like, oh damn. All right.
Yeah, and he was having real fights, right? Like Ray Edwards fought like a tomato can, right? But Herschel Walker had like real fights. That's the craziest thing.
Yeah, it was a bit nuts. Ryan Menson asks, a recent trend in the English Premier League has been to hire highly specialized coaches to focus exclusively on a very specific aspect of the game, i.e. set-piece coaches or throw-in coaches. Is there anything where something similar could help give the Vikings an edge? Perhaps a second and long coach? Or maybe have Clint solely focus on scripting opening drives where he excels and let someone else coordinate for the rest of the game?
The idea of a throw-in coach specifically is very funny to me. I love that. I want that job. I'm sure I'd get fired pretty quickly because I don't know very much about throwing in. And obviously, you're coaching the whole team, not just the person that's throwing the ball in. But it is fundamentally very funny. Right? Because, I mean, you're running basically like pick plays like at the end of NBA games, right? But still, very funny, 100% approve. That cannot be a job where you're clocking 40 hours a week, right? So that's great. Good for throwing coaches. As for the version for the Vikings, I actually think that there should be a special teams coach exclusively focused on kicking. And by that, I both mean kicking mechanics and somebody with like a deep degree in sports psychology, right? You could have a special teams coach for the other 10 players on field goal plays and all of that jazz, right? You can run up your special teams plays. You got to coach, the whole unit to do well. But I think a kicking specialist coach that has both a background in sports psychology and kicking mechanics, I think would be pretty ideal because a lot of kickers already consult private kicking consultants that work on mechanics in the off season, incorporating that into kind of a full season regimen. Because kickers, they're on a pitch count. Like, part of the reason that kickers and punters don't practice very much at practice, it's not just because, there's only so much that you can do before it's repetitive. It's more, you can't really wear out somebody's leg before they get injured. And so spending some of that practice time elsewhere doesn't really come with a huge opportunity cost. I think that would be one thing. As for stuff that sounds more absurd and is obviously a little bit more delightful, a second and long coach would obviously be funny, and they would be specializing in second and long, and so they would call the right plays on second and long. But we are actually getting there in the NFL because there are coordinators whose only job it is, I shouldn't say coordinators, but there are people who add on to their job red zone coordinator, and they only call plays within the red zone. And that's in fact what John DeFilippo was for the Eagles before he got hired by the Vikings. He was the red zone coordinator, or rather he called plays in the red zone. So you're kind of getting there at some point. I know that for the 49ers, there were 6 different, when Harbaugh was there were 6 different elements involved in the play calling process, and they all had their own kind of specialty. That's probably too much, but other elements, I think, a game management coach where their only job is to be good at clock management, and they also handle the challenges and stuff like that because those don't overlap because the time clock management matters. Challenges are taken off the board and stuff like that. I think that would be really good. Obviously, the coach still has the capability of calling timeouts and stuff like that, but they would primarily use that like if the clock is running down and the offense doesn't have their play in, or if the defense isn't set, or if you have the wrong personnel out there, normal timeout stuff. But when it comes to clock management stuff, it is really up to the clock management coach to get that right. So I think that those are really good areas where you could have a specific coach, but like funny areas like second and long, that also is great. Let's do that. We could have a pass protection offensive line coach and a run blocking offensive line coach. Yeah, aren't those two married together? Probably. Would you want them to have the same stance coming out of the snap? Yeah, probably. But it's funny. So I like it.
I feel like at that point, too, on special teams, especially for kicking, we should just hire like a voodoo priestess. Like we can just hire a voodoo woman named Phyllis to hang out on the sideline for that. I feel like that could only bring good things to us.
Yeah, I think sort of any pagan ritual that you can import into kind of the team's overall philosophy, I think the better. Certainly, I think that the faith family football culture of the NFL would welcome that because it is a faith.
I can think of no group that would be more welcoming, quite frankly. And let's go to Luke Braun, who brings up the corporate aspect of things. Are the Vikings the most corporate team in the NFL? Extremely corporate quarterback, extremely vanilla PR-wise. It literally says a corporate environment on the sign into the practice facility. Does any franchise, the entity as a whole, not just the players, have less soul?
All right, so the first thing I want to say is that Luke should know that corporations are people, and therefore they automatically have a soul. That's been decided by the most venerated institution in the land, the Supreme Court. So you just have to accept it. Corporations have souls. Second, to me, the answer I think has to be the Giants. Part of the reason that I pick the Giants over the Vikings is in part you still have Mike Zimmer doing Mike Zimmer stuff, so that like reduces kind of the corporate PR feel, the whitewash feel that you get. But also like the Kirk Cousins being like a fairly stodgy quarter. I mean, he literally calls himself a CEO and he like reads CEO motivational books. So I 100% get where you're coming from, but also like there's not a ton of corporations in the sense that we think of like Fortune 500 corporations that are like as willing to wade into the controversy about say like vaccines, right? As Cousins. So there is that. But yeah, I think the Vikings are up there. But I would take the Giants because Daniel Jones is very much like that. That's what they valued about Daniel Jones, is that they reminded him of Eli Manning. There are like pictures of them wearing like the exact same clothing outside, obviously, of football uniform. And it's just like they're all wearing like their pleated khakis and like the button-up shirt that's tucked in with the belt. And like that's very who they are. Gettleman is a little bit, I wouldn't say like off the cuff, but he's a little bit less corporate. But Joe Judge is super corporate. The whole organization seems super corporate. And the degree to which Gettleman kind of varies from that corporate speak is significantly smaller than the amount that Zimmer veers away from it. And Gettleman has less availability to the media. Zimmer's availability multiple times a week. And so that's just like part of it. So I would say that the Giants are up there. Probably like if we wanted to include tech bros, like the Cardinals are up there. Like they're a tech bro Silicon Valley corporate environment just because of the way Kingsbury operates and how like new wavy they are, but like in a very tech oriented way. Like this is more efficient. And then I can't really think of any that are like more corporate than the Giants. Like you could have probably said the Steelers for a while, but I just feel like there's a looseness to them sometimes. It's not necessarily good, but you get like Mike Tomlin snapping a little bit. You've got, the quarterback that people love to hate. The receivers are always acting out, right? Whether it's Mike Williams or Antonio Brown or Juju Smith-Schuster or whatever, right? But there is kind of a corporateness to the Steelers that I think challenges the Vikings in that area, but I think it's got to be the Giants as number one.
And plus, if you look at the stadium that the Giants play in, MetLife Stadium, my first thought when we pulled up to it, it looked like an office building.
It did, yeah.
The exterior really did, in fact, look like it. So there definitely is that aspect of it to it as well. The rest of the mailbag is going to go completely off topic for those who are interested. Just letting you know, we have reached the last of the really relevant stuff to football, but we still have relevant stuff to Arif and I. Damian Barrett asks, it's that time of year again for Arif to formally denounce candy corn for the trash it is. His long-standing stance on it's good if you make it properly is the same logic that applies to his turkey hatred as is his I don't eat it because there's better alternatives. Call out his hypocrisy. Arif, you have the floor for, let's go 1 minute.
I'm going to speak longer than a minute, James. Don't even try.
2. You're on the clock.
So, sure. So the one thing here is that this doesn't make any sense because I'm saying that they are two completely different products. Candy corn made at home is made of different stuff than candy corn that's sold corporately, which is generally like a food grade wax or kind of a mallow product that is not the mallow that you make, the mallow cream that you make when you make it at home. It's like saying, I like turkey because this chicken is sometimes called turkey, but I don't like turkey when it is turkey, right? Candy corn has branded itself as a particular product that it is not. So it's not the same thing. Yeah, if turkey is made well, it can taste good. But if you make something equally well, like chicken, it tastes better. That's not the same. These are two completely different products. So I don't really care that, candy corn that's sold, like by Brock's or whatever is made in product. It's a different product. It's made of different ingredients. So it's just a name thing. If I called some chicken turkey and also called turkey turkey, I would not be hypocritical for me to be like, well, I like the turkey that's chicken. That's a different species. So there's no hypocrisy here. It's just a labeling error.
I was expecting to go the full 2 minutes there. So kudos to you. This is the only time I've ever heard of a policy debater not using his time.
I did get more speaker points in a debate because I finished halfway through the speech and decided not to speak more. That's how you know you're winning.
Oh, is that it? Because every time that happened to me in LD, it usually spelled disaster. But we'll move on. Also from Damian Barrett, I'm spending Christmas in Minnesota and will use the occasion to go to US Bank Stadium for my first time. Should I buy tickets for the game against the Rams now, or should I wait until the availability price has been influenced by our performance in the upcoming string of games?
Yeah, the next 4 games are like a nightmare, so absolutely wait. And I think that the benefit to waiting is like, it's kind of a win-win because if the Vikings are like really good and the price goes up, yeah, you have to pay more, but you're just going to be more excited to go to that game and you won't kind of dread watching the Vikings, which is a very normal thing to do. I would wait, and it is very likely that the Vikings will just seem like a less interesting team by the end of the stretch. Price will drop down. Then they'll get to play like the Lions again or whatever, and maybe the price goes back up, and you just kind of want to buy the dip.
There you go. Let's go to Nolan Kaler, who asks, did Derrick Henry throw a touchdown pass solely to boost his MVP odds?
Yeah, selfish, craven effort from Derrick Henry to call that play. Absolutely.
It was fantastic. Also, question for North Code, was releasing Weatherly just a cap move to sign Blue Bomber defensive MVP, Willie Jefferson?
I love the North Code thing because I always have to Google who these people are right before the show, or in some cases during the show. Willie Jefferson, by the way, is 30, but he's currently a really good CFL player. He's a defensive end. He makes like $260,000 a year for the CFL, which is quite a bit CFL-wise, but it's probably pretty easy to get him in. He's a pretty good edge rusher. Is he the most outstanding defensive player? He was last year for the Bombers, and so when he was 29. So yeah, bring him in. I don't really care. That sounds good. He had like 12 sacks last year in the CFL. I guess that's really hard. Go ahead. He batted down a bunch of passes.
Your analysis sometimes just shocks me and how in depth and
yeah,
prepared.
No, for sure. I definitely wasn't Googling it during the question.
Yeah, we couldn't hear your mouse clicking at all. It was great. Bishop Sycamore alumnus asks, call back to last year's relationship corner. Those who remember this question from last year remember how appalled we were at the basis of this. So keeping that in mind, as the game is happening during the holiday festivities, what excuse can I come up with to justify watching the game over the normal Halloween activity of decorating the in-laws' Christmas tree? For those who remember from last year, this poor gentleman is forced against his will to decorate his in-laws' Christmas tree, and their tradition states that it happens on Halloween?
I don't, right? Like, I just feel like any excuse you can have to not be part of this tradition is probably fair, because this is like immoral activity that they're pressing you to do, right? Like, you've been captured off of like a ship and you've been shanghaied into it. Is that a racist term? Probably not. I can't believe Halloween activity of decorating a Christmas tree. War crime.
I was going to go with sacrilegious, but yeah, war crime. War crime also.
Well, I care about war crimes.
You were just questioning as to whether or not Shanghai was a racist term, so I guess
I concluded that it probably wasn't. Mostly because I just used it and I didn't want to hurt myself.
You didn't want me to just, be forced to go back into the edit and write it down and whatever.
Yeah.
This is all being done in the name of me not having to do edit points, which I appreciate. Also, I'm the last person you should be asking any relationship questions to, so I'm going to skip over this one and go to Don from Ohio, who asks, which member of Vikings Twitter will have the worst Halloween pun during the game Sunday night?
So we discussed this before the show, and I thought Luke Braun was a strong candidate, and I was completely blown away by how wrong I was, because James came up with two excellent candidates, one of which is very obvious that I'll name right now, and I'll let James name the other one, and give his argument for why it's actually even odds and not very obviously Ted Glover, who revels in this, would absolutely love to fire off some Halloween puns, but there is a strong argument that it may not be him.
It's true. See, my first thought was that this is a 2-horse race. This is either Eric Thompson's one to lose, or it is Ted Glover. The problem is that Eric has at least 2 daughters and is going to be busy doing Halloween stuff.
The problem is that he has daughters.
Well, the problem is that he is an active father, and as a result, he may be out trick-or-treating with the kids instead of watching the game live. And so, not watching the game live, he may miss an opportunity to throw some of these like gems out there. Because Eric has been known to throw out some pretty good dad jokes slash puns. The other chance is Ted, and I said earlier today on Twitter that Ted is a strong candidate for this. He may also have one drink too many and forget to tweet and just say it aloud, and have it
say it aloud to himself.
I have this problem too. I'm getting older, and I say things aloud. I make the realization there's nobody in the house. Like, why isn't anybody here to laugh at this? It sucks. So. All things are possible through Ben DiNucci, but this is I feel like this is a 2-horse race, but Luke is a very strong third-party candidate.
Yeah, no, I think that if you were kind of to try to put your money down on like some Leicester City odds, right? Like long odds, it'll pay off. Leicester, I think it's Leicester. I think Luke Braun is, yeah. I pronounced it correctly like 2 episodes ago, too. I think Luke Braun is a good one to kind of throw your money down on. But yeah, it's Eric Thompson is such a good candidate for this.
It is. We'll just have to see if he shows up on game day.
Right. Well, we'll see. We'll see how good of a father he is, and by that I mean if he tweets he's not one.
Boy, that got oddly specific. And all of the foam that I have set up in my new space proceeds to crumble down. Like it was, as the episode started. I'm keeping this in. I don't care. I'm not doing an edit point for this. I recently moved and I put up my foam and everything up into the corner, and everything like looked good when I sat down. And then slowly but surely, 1, 2, 3 pieces just started falling, and like
it's so beautiful.
I had 24 pieces up. I may have 6 left now.
Incredible.
Like all during the last bit of that question, just watching the lemmings fall off the ledge. It was.
If you feel called out, I guess that says something about you, huh?
Boy, I don't even know where to start on this.
Next question.
Next question is from Manuel, who asks, do you reckon the Queen could identify Mario? Like, if you showed the Queen a picture of Mario, would she be able to say, that's Mario?
Currently a viral tweet right now that he sent us. No way. No. How old is she? How old is the Queen? I'm going to just Google.
She's almost 100. I will say that.
Yeah. Remember when we were she's 95. Remember when we were in London and we were at that pub that like listed all of the monarchs that the pub had had been active for, and it was like a staggering amount of history to realize all at once. And like the Queen being like just one of like 14 members of this list, despite being 95 years old. Yeah. So when did Mario come out? The 80s, right? Like 82 or something like that?
Yes. Early 80s. Yes.
So what? She was like 65? No way. Like, I'm not saying that like 65-year-olds are not like, don't understand pop culture. We did just talk about how Ted Glover is going to be tweeting out some very ripe puns. But I think that if you're the Queen of England, there's a really good chance you're insulated from broader culture, especially like video games. No one wants to talk about those for like 20 years. By the time video games are like acceptable mainstream discussions, like she's completely out of it. No way would she be able to identify Mario.
Ewan Dewar asks the question for the texture corner. What is the food with the most intense mouthfeel? Excluding, of course, Jesus. Things that are blatantly dangerous or harrowing to eat, like a sword or a family goldfish.
There's like a non-zero population of people that listen to this podcast that also watch ContraPoints on YouTube. And so that question like hits a little different for them. So I will point that out for them so that they can recognize that happened. And then answer the question straight. The most intense mouthfeel, tripe is up there, which I enjoy. I know when we were watching, was it Ugly Delicious, right? With David Chang, he brought up the fact that, Chinese cuisine in particular, values, unique textures in food. And so there's probably a lot of textures in that cuisine that did not get imported into American Chinese, that probably qualify for this, but I wouldn't be able to kind of name it very well. But I think eel, which you can find, like in sushi and stuff like that, it might be up there. I'm thinking specifically of like slimy stuff, but that's like the stuff that, cause like it's very difficult to find like an intense, crunchy food, right? Because otherwise you just can't bite into it. There's only so much intensity for it to have an impact on you.
Well, there's these, like, the way that they have some of those like kettle chips in the chip aisle that are just,
like which are the perfect thickness for you to like really feel the bite.
Yeah. It's like you bite into it and you might as well just be like biting into a rock.
Yeah.
Like they go just a bit too far. Like that's the first thing I was thinking of is like, cause you're really working for it at that point. You might actually be losing weight trying to just chew those.
Right. But I just feel like there's a ceiling on how intense that can feel. Like, if you're swallowing an eel, right? That sentence sounds way more intense than your memory of eating a kettle chip, right?
Well, it certainly sounds more violent.
Sure. So let's go with that. I can't think of, because that's like food, right? Because the exclusions seem to be stuff that's not traditionally considered food, although there are people who eat goldfish, and I don't mean like circus act goldfish, but like goldfish were like originally raised for food. But probably not in the way that the question is talking about, right? Like you would just eat the fish like it was a fish. So I'm going to go with eel or tripe.
Tripe is definitely different. I will say that the fact that you
I
can
like it. I usually get it when we go to El Taco Riendo here in Minneapolis.
Like the texture of it, like the kind of like honeycomb situation of it. So there is a lot going on there. Dr. Aaron Matson asks, if there was a quote Norse code papers scandal, what would it reveal? That Arif Hassan's hatred of Turkey comes from him being bribed by Big Chicken? That Dusty had to quote disappear due to some illicit activity? Gambling? Something else? Also, if you had to rebrand, what dumb name would you choose to put the scandal behind you?
All right. So, first of all, Dusty's illicit activities have been well referenced on Norse code. There's no reason for us to dig deep into the Norse code papers to find out that Dusty has been engaging in some less than legal behavior, which I think is enough for us to say without incriminating him in an actual crime. So, I'll just go ahead and say that.
I mean, one of my better stories involves sitting with Dusty while I you know what? I can't even begin to tell this story on the
in
actual
the process
show.
of a crime. Yeah, okay,
I can't even. It was not in the process of a crime. I'm not in a position where I can say. I don't know if I can say this story on air. We might have to wait. This might have to be a live
we'll wait
show
for a live
thing.
show. Yeah.
Hey,
great,
there conveniently
good.
happens to be one next week at Violence Four Courts.
You can make your way over to North Virginia.
If you make your way over to North Virginia, I can tell you all about the time I spent with Dusty. So,
who is very much alive.
He just tweeted at me. So yes.
Yeah. No, perfect. Yeah, I can't fake that. Hatred of turkey comes from being bribed by Big Chicken. I would gladly accept a check from Tyson or whatever. Right. I actually know the granddaughter of a chicken heiress, a chicken empire heiress. She, of course, is a vegan because life is hilarious. But I do know someone who's the heir to a chicken food empire. And so I would totally welcome those connections. And I would even be above board about it unless it lost me that check. So no, that probably would not be in the Norse Code papers. Let's see what would be. I think me being paid by James Madison along the same lines. Me being paid by James Madison probably would be
that would. Right? I think that would ruin the shtick. Yeah. Yeah,
I think a reveal that my love of James Madison was not either part of a bit or genuine or both for some reason.
They weren't really your dukes.
Right. Yeah. If they were not my dukes. If I was their Duke, I guess if would be the way to put it, it would really kind of collapse the authenticity of the show.
There's a Prince song about if I were your girlfriend. Like, if I were your Duke, it's the only thing that came into my head there. And oh no, that took a turn.
There's that. The reveal that we haven't watched any Nick Cage movies, I think, would be a pretty big one.
Ooh, that's bad for this year, especially.
For this year.
And there goes another piece of foam.
Yeah, me never having actually made candy corn. I think the biggest one is actually me liking turkey. Like if the Norse Code papers reveal that I actually did like turkey,
I mean, it's
was neutral.
It's on the logo.
Yeah, it's part of this. Yeah, I think that's the biggest scandal. Me liking turkey. Which we don't have to worry about because I don't. What rebrand name would we choose? I think we would just choose something along the lines of Washington Football Team, right? Like I think we would just choose Minnesota Vikings Podcast.
I'm as somebody who has Googled Minnesota Vikings podcast fairly recently, or at least gone onto the Apple Podcast app, like. Boy, that would be about as death as you could possibly choose to get your show buried. So yeah, why not?
Yeah. I mean, we're trying to get a scandal behind us, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, we're just trying to get all meta and everything. Stevie asks, question for Arif's Turkey and Parenting Corner. My daughter
don't like those corners being combined. Let's see where this goes.
My daughter is turning 3 this weekend, and when asked what she wanted for a gift, she says she wants to eat turkey, not for dinner, but as a birthday gift. Should she spend the birthday at the fire station?
Okay, so if your daughter was older, it would make sense to get an actually good an heirloom turkey, which is not part of the take, like an heirloom turkey with actual flavor. But she's 3, what a waste. Part of me is just when kids ask for things that are bad for them but won't hurt them, give it to them so they realize what they've done wrong. And that's kind of where I want to go here. But I also know that kids will not respond the way you ever expect them to, and so she might just end up liking the turkey, which would be the worst case scenario. I think you should get her the Jones Soda Thanksgiving turkey soda, if those still exist. Do those still exist?
Boy, I haven't seen that in a very, very long time. Usually they
probably not. I'm probably just old.
Those don't come around until sometime a little closer to Christmas. But I guess it depends on when the birthday. Okay, yeah, you can get turkey and gravy from Jones Soda Company. The countdown says you can get them now, I guess.
I don't know. The website might just not be updated. I would look into this and do that. Oh, it says it's coming back after a decade away. And this was published on September 21st of this year. So yeah, perfect timing. Get the Jones soda, turkey and gravy flavor for your clearly wrong daughter and tell her how wrong she is by giving her a pop.
Yes, teach her that she's wrong by giving her soda and sugar. This can only this can only go well. You're really better off at this point just giving them the green bean casserole soda as well, just to like hammer this home.
Yeah, you're bringing back the whole line. So yeah, no, for sure.
That's terrible and gross. All right. Well, on that fascinating note, we are going to end this episode of Norse Code. We will be back on Monday to talk about hopefully the victory over the Cowboys. So hopefully you guys will tune in for that. Just a reminder that on November 4th, we will be doing a live show over at Ireland's Four Courts, the James Joyce Room, sometime about 7:00 p.m. We will be giving away, of course, a ticket to the Ravens game. So hope you guys show up. Arif, what do you have to plug?
I've got a few pieces up over at The Athletic, the most recent of which include a piece on Patrick Peterson, his impact on the defense during this like awful stretch, the worst stretch you could possibly have to miss a corner in. Obviously, that KJ Osborne piece I wrote a bit ago that I'm pretty proud of, and a playoff odds piece about how the Vikings are actually in the mix, like some 40% odds to make the playoffs, which is very weird if you've watched their games.
All right, well, that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Again, hope you guys have enjoyed it. We will be back next week. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember, case cookus. And we will be back next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's official Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. You can also find his written work at theathletic.com. I am your podcast host and producer, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can make a recurring monthly contribution by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. A donation of $3.50 per month does get you bonus material from the show and much more. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.